Nico Collins is back at practice, which means he's back in your fantasy lineups immediately. We dig into and debate our wide receiver and tight end rankings for week 10 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're here every single day, Monday through Friday, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. It is time to start discussing our wide receiver and tight end rankings for week 10. We already went through our running back and quarterback rankings on yesterday's show. So if you missed that, you can go listen to it after this. But let's just start right at the top here at wide receivers. We have the usual suspects, obviously, of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all great plays this week. But I wanted to bring up Nico Collins because I'm getting some questions about him. And people are a little bit nervous about plugging him in immediately after coming off of IR. But I think he's a great play right away against this Lions defense that's good against the run, but you can pass on them.
Yeah, I'm looking at any player that comes back. You have to trust that they're going to be fully healthy to play. Now, it could be someone coming off IR. I think they're a little bit slow, right, with that. But Nico Collins, it's just direct. If he's ready to go and he's practicing and he's out there, they need him. They just lost a game badly last week to the Jets. They've had the extra time for him to be ready for this game. It's a night game, so he should warm up, but just check the reports to make sure he's going. I don't think there's a great pivot you can make in this game if he doesn't go. So just be prepared to check out the reports, make sure he's going. If he's going, he's the wide receiver one in average scoring in half-point PPR right now. When he's out there, he's been the best this season. Don't overthink it. Just put him in there. And again, the Lions secondary easily can be beat in this game, and they're going to have to pass quite a bit in that game.
Yeah, I mean, Collins had 100 more receiving yards than any other player from weeks 1 through 4. And then even in week 5, when he got hurt after playing 9 snaps, he already had 78 yards and a touchdown in that game because he got hurt on that long touchdown. But yeah, Collins is just a must play immediately. Now, one guy I've ranked a little bit higher than you, it's Malik Nabers against the Panthers. It's not like you're super low. You have him at 10, which he has not been performing at that elite level we saw before he got that concussion. But I have him at wide receiver 5. I like the matchup against the Panthers, and he's getting an absurd amount of targets still. I mean, over his last 5 games played, it's been 18, 12, 15, and then 8, but then 13 and 11. Like, no one else is getting volume like this on a consistent basis. Darius Slayton might not be playing either, which is going to lead to even more targets for Nabers and maybe some more downfield targets. He obviously needs to score some touchdowns, but his volume's just too high in a good matchup.
Yeah, last week was disappointing, especially what he did against the Commanders the first time. And he's been a little bit quiet, but part of it is this team has gone in the tank a few games offensively. They rebounded a little bit against the Commanders. Daniel Jones got going. Now, Nabers didn't go off, but the Panthers secondary is pretty weak. This is a good chance to get all your Giants going. And this matchup, again, as you mentioned, the volume is definitely going to be high. It's just about the connections, making sure he gets the big play and or a score. And I think it's going to finally happen in this one. It's been a bit of a drought here. He's heard a lot of the rumors of Brian Thomas Jr. being the best rookie wide receiver. He's going to hear that. Marvin Harrison has kind of faded a little bit, but he could be back. But I think Nabers is the best rookie wide receiver, and I think he'll prove it this week. And finally, a matchup that he can totally destroy here in the Panthers.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see him. Again, he needs to put up that touchdown to get to top 5, but I think he could do it this week. I mean, he was scoring touchdowns to start the year. It's just kind of gone away lately. Other guys we have in our top 7, Garrett Wilson, Cooper Kupp, they've been fantastic. You're starting them and you're happy with their matchups as well this week. Now, 3 other guys, though, that we both agree on, and we have them in like inside our top 13 each. It's Deebo Samuel against the Buccaneers, Devonta Smith against the Cowboys, and Zay Flowers against the Bears. Bengals. I mean, tonight, Zay Flowers against this Bengals secondary, he's been going off in games every single week. There's no reason he shouldn't do it again. He's had over 110 receiving yards in 4 of the last 5 games. Like, there is no reason he shouldn't go off. Devonta might be playing without A.J. Brown, and he's been consistent. And then Deebo Samuel is coming back from the rib injury and pneumonia, but had the bye week. He's been highly involved in this offense as of late. I think he's going to have a great game against that bad Buccaneers secondary.
Yeah, what I think you'll see is a little bit of Deebo trying to take a little pressure off Christian McCaffrey in the running game, and they'll use Christian McCaffrey quite a bit, but I think that's a little bit different, right? Coming off IR, they'll be a little bit careful knowing they have Deebo, and again, Deebo's going to dominate some of the targets. Juwan Jennings looks like he's trending to return, but there is no Brandon Ayuk. This looks like a very good Samuel and George Kittle game all over the field here for Brock Purdy. The middle of the field left wide open there against the Chiefs last week. So those two receivers kind of fall in, mostly Kittle, and what they can do with Samuel, I think, are very parallel to that. Now, Flowers and Jamar Chase, these are the two guys that I want more than anyone else in my DFS lineups this week. I just like it. I mean, the quarterbacks are expensive, but you want a piece of them in these DFS lineups. Pick one quarterback, get both of these receivers in. And Devonta, he had a bit of a hamstring issue. He should play. Let's watch that, however, and see if that is concerning at all. But the Cowboys, look, they're beat up. They're pretty much put a white flag on the season. So I think that's going to be a great game for Jalen Hurts and the entire passing game.
Yeah, and Saquon Barkley, I mean, we talked about him yesterday, obviously top 2 in our rankings, just because they probably were going to run the ball so much against the Cowboys. So if A.J. Brown does end up playing, I'll probably end up moving Devonta Smith down. But if Brown's out and Smith's good to go, I'm happy with him as a top 10 play this week. Now, I brought up that we have Cooper Kupp I have him at 6, you have him at 5. So we clearly love him against the Dolphins. But what about Puka Nacua? Because 2 weeks ago, everyone was scared to play him coming off the injury, and he has a great game. Then he kind of re-injures himself on Friday before last week, and we don't know what's happening, but he plays, doesn't do anything for the first half, 1 reception, 11 yards, and then gets ejected before halftime. Are you trusting Nacua now this week? I still have him ranked pretty high. I have him at 13. You have him a little bit lower at 19. What are your thoughts on Puka?
Yeah, I think it's more of a cup game to me based on the coverages of the Dolphins, where you've seen a lot of damage inside. They've had a shaky corner, Cade Kahu, but he's also hurt now. So, look, Jalen Ramsey is still a little bit of a wily guy. He's going to be fired up a little bit on Monday night, coming back to Los Angeles. He's going to play a little bit motivated here. So, Nacua and Ramsey, that could be a bit of a heated battle, right? After what happened with Nacua in the ejection last week. So that still says he can put up really good numbers here. But again, they are involving some other guys for big play threats. They don't mind pivoting to Marcus Robinson if they need to. And you look at, again, Kupp should just dominate in this game. Like, he should get open all game long. So that's what you look at, and playing off the running game with Kyren Williams. They'll probably work the middle of the field a little bit more in this game.
It's so confusing to me that Puka's not a really good touchdown scorer, because we're seeing DeMarcus Robinson put up multiple touchdowns a game. We know Cooper Kupp is dominant with Matthew Stafford and scoring touchdowns. And then with Puka, it's just he didn't have many as a rookie last year. Does he even have one this year yet? I'm not sure. I mean, I know he's barely played, but we're going to need to get Puka some touchdowns here moving forward. Now, George Pickens, he's a really, really tough guy to figure out where to rank him this week, because we know he's going to get the targets from Russell Wilson. We know he's going to get deep shots and probably come down with at least one of them. But will he get a touchdown? He only has 1 this year. And then he plays a very tough Commanders pass defense. They're number 1 in the league in passing yards per game allowed since week 4. And then they just added Marshawn Lattimore, who's a top tier cornerback that's probably going to be on Pickens. So we both have Pickens ranked at wide receiver 17, but I don't feel confident in that ranking, I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking about him higher, but then I looked at the Lattimore deal and I had to slide him down a bit. I mean, it kind of was in the process of me looking where to put George Pickens this week. Now, Lattimore can be beat. I mean, his legendary games have come against Mike Evans
Yeah.
and the Buccaneers. But look, we'll see how much he can get going, right? Learning this scheme. It's a lot different from what he's seen with Dennis Allen, with Dan Quinn. So maybe that's a thing where they worry about his snaps and all that. But the place where I think the Commanders are going to try to win in the passing game is up front and maybe limit those deep shots. But look, Russell Wilson is going to put it up to George Pickens. He's a good contested catch guy. Even when he's covered, he can make some plays here. So there's going to be enough there, but I just don't see him exploding like we've seen in some games past with Wilson.
Yeah, and don't worry too much about the Week 8 game before their bye. The 4 for 74 and only 9 fantasy points. Like 2 huge plays got called back for him. He could have put up 2 touchdowns pretty easily in that game. So I'm still rolling with him. Just a little bit nervous about the matchup. That is all. We have a lot more to get to with the wide receivers. We need these rookies to bounce back, and Brian Thomas Jr. and Marvin Harrison Jr. But it's not looking too great for either one, but for different reasons. We will get into that right after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. All you have to do is remember to drink Z-Biotics for your first drink of the night. Then drink responsibly. Obviously, pace yourself. Get some water in you throughout the night as well. And then you get to wake up feeling refreshed the next morning and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedon NFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed by 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and use code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout for 15% off. So Brian Thomas Jr. has been really good this year for most of the year, right? And he gets a nice matchup against the Vikings, but he completely disappeared last week with just 2 receptions, 22 yards. And then you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who's had 2 big weeks and then his average about like 23 receiving yards per game over the other 7 games of his rookie season. The last time we moved down Marvin Harrison is when he had his one good game over the last month and a half, but he gets the Jets this week. Hate that matchup. And then with Brian Thomas Jr., it looks like he's not going to have Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback.
Yeah, that's a big blow here. And Trevor Lawrence was actually sneakily getting up to QB 15 in fantasy. It's been a bizarre year because Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence have been good in fantasy, but reality, everyone knows they stink. And probably because Lawrence was running. Maybe that's what helped get him hurt from last week. Yeah, this is a concerning thing that has developed here in the middle of the week with Lawrence. And yeah, I don't know what you get because it was inconsistent last week. It wasn't as we expected with Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk out. Now they got Parker Washington trying to fill that role, which is not very good. He's getting volume, but that's about it, right? And we thought it was going to be Thomas and Ingram. And the Vikings have given up quite a bit to wide receivers, but last week what happened? You didn't really have good quarterback play up front. You had a guy under siege, and the Vikings have a good pass rush. So it's a little concerning that they may not be able to stretch the field. Brian Thomas, he's going to have to get by in volume versus big plays and touchdowns this week to count as a wide receiver too, I think.
Yeah, I know. He's been so big play dependent. And with a backup quarterback, who's going to start? Blaine Gabbert?
Yeah.
So
That'd be crazy.
I don't know who's going to start for them. Mac Jones, whatever. I just don't have much confidence in that. You might still have to play him. Who would you rather start? Brian Thomas Jr. against the Vikings with a backup quarterback or Marvin Harrison Jr. against the Jets?
I think the matchup says Thomas, and I think he's played better overall, and they've at least figured out a scheme up. And I think the Cardinals have had a little struggle, and they're fine if they had to pivot to Trey McBride or Michael Wilson or just run the ball, right? So that's why I'm going. I don't have high hopes for either, but at least Brian Thomas, I think, can have a floor to get to wide receiver 2, where Harrison, the bottom, could drop out as a wide receiver 3.
It's wild. He's finished as the wide receiver 54 or worse on the week in 4 out of the last 5 weeks. He's been atrocious. But then he did have a top 5 finish, smacked in there as well. So who knows? But I'm not feeling good about either of those guys. Darnell Mooney, though, on the other hand, we both like this week. He's a really good play against the Saints, especially if Drake London is out. But I still think he's a solid play, even if Drake London does end up playing. Saints defense stinks. They don't even have Lattimore anymore. And over the last 2 weeks, Mooney's put up over 170 yards and 2 touchdowns combined.
Yeah, he just has a real good chemistry with Kirk Cousins, and that's why we're selling him a lot as one of the later picks in your draft. He was an afterthought in a lot of spots. I didn't think he was going to do this well. Let's, for the record, let's say that. Like, I didn't think he was going to have these blow-up games with multiple touchdowns because we didn't see this in Chicago. Maybe we didn't see this in Chicago because the passing game stunk with Justin Fields and the transition from Andy Dalton and all that. So when you look at this situation, I think this is really good. I mean, the question is, how much are they going to pass? I actually think the Saints will be competitive in this game. I think they're going to throw some wrinkles. What happens when they fire a coach? They come out fired up, play some offense, and they're not like totally void of offense, right? I mean, you have Taysom Hill, you have Alvin Kamara. The tight ends can do some damage here. So they're not completely dead offensively. That's going to be good. You want them to be somewhat competitive so you can get Kirk Cousins to throw. But again, the nature of this Falcons offense is passing first, get the big plays, then hand the ball over to Bijan Robinson. So I really like Mooney, and if London plays, you like him too, because if Lattimore was in there, I think it would be a much tougher matchup for London.
Yeah, for sure. If London plays, it gets interesting for both of these guys. But even if he does play, I think I like Mooney the best out of the two,
Yeah.
just with what Mooney can do, and he's healthy, and we know he could be that deep threat. And the Saints again are just so bad. So I have Mooney ranked 18th this week. Give him at 22. We both think he's a really good wide receiver to play. Now, what about Jameson Williams? He's finished his 2-game suspension. He's coming back in what should be a very high scoring matchup, you would think, against the Lions, coming to Houston. And Nico Collins is back for the other side. So the Texans should be able to put up points, meaning the Lions have to put up points. Jameson Williams had a terrible game right before his suspension, but before that, he was having a really good fantasy year.
Yeah, we have him very close. You have him at 26. I'm at 24. So borderline wide receiver 2, 3. And it's a big play threat. And you look at the Texans, they do give up big plays downfield. We saw it last week with Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. And the other thing they do is they cover the tight end pretty well, partly because they give up so many things downfield to wide receivers, so they don't really need to be tested. So I think this could be a big game for both him and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't think they can cover either. The secondary is just not very good overall. I mean, they have Darrell Stingley Jr. It's not bad, but he's young. He's been burnt downfield a few times. So I do think Williams, though, and welcome him back into the fray. He's itching to make some big plays here for Jared Goff. I actually like Goff more than I have in a few weeks this week for fantasy. So I do like the combination. If you're playing DFS, a Goff-Williams tournament thing is not that bad either.
Yeah, I like Goff Williams. I like Goff Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
I like Stroud and Nico Collins. So that game should be good. Now, what about Tank Dell? Because he finally had that big game without Nico Collins there, and it was against the Jets, a tougher defense. But let me ask you, would you rather go with Tank Dell against the Lions, DeAndre Hopkins against the Broncos, or Josh Downs against the Bills this week?
Yeah, Josh Downs is completely out. I just
completely out. He had nine targets last week. 6
I
for
know.
60.
I don't see this game going well for the Colts. I'll just say this. I just think this is a much tougher spot. Even, I mean, last week the Vikings were a tough defense. The Bills coming in there swarming Joe Flacco. I do not like it because I think there's going to be a pivot mid-game to Anthony Richardson. That's how I think it could get bad. So that's what I'm going to say. I don't like Pittman or Josh Downs, and they're just a good coverage team there, the Bills. So they're out, but it's very close between the other two. I have Tank Dell 20. I like his matchup a lot better, but DeAndre Hopkins is DeAndre Hopkins. I know it's a tough matchup against the Broncos, but Patrick Mahomes owns the Broncos. He just has a knack of playing well and putting up numbers.
Can I stop you right there, Vinnie, though, real quick?
Yeah.
He owns the Broncos, but he had 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions over his 2 games last year. So maybe he previously owned them, but last year, not so much.
Well, the Broncos, the thing here is the Broncos need to be somewhat competitive in this one, and maybe they will be early. But I just think Mahomes, you saw him. Like, he's excited to throw to Hopkins, right? there's something there. Like he had Rashee Rice early in the season. He was feeling that vibe. I think part of that, we can't forget that, right? It's been a revolving door. Marquise Brown, Rashee Rice, Juju Smith-Schuster, these guys keep getting hurt. So as soon as one of the guys pops up and is valuable and is out there, like Hopkins and Kelsey the last 2 weeks, you have to say that he's reemerged as well. So look, it's not super exciting, but I think Hopkins is going to get a lot of targets in the red zone. That's pretty clear here for what they want to do. And Kareem Hunt might be wearing down a little bit. I think they're putting him too much with a workload, and I think they're going to have to pass a little bit to alleviate that. And again, the Broncos' pass defense, as we saw last week, against a quarterback who can dictate some things, they're not as good as we think they are.
Yeah, it's just I actually so I wanted to remind myself last week because I had Hopkins ranked super high last week. I had him at like 20 or something. I loved him against the Buccaneers, but I wanted to remind myself if he goes off, it's because it's against the Buccaneers. It doesn't mean he's going to be amazing the rest of the year. So I do still have Hopkins ranked at 25 against the Broncos. I might end up putting him down a little bit, but I have Tank Dell and Josh Downs both ranked ahead of him. So I would go Dell, then Downs, and then DeAndre Hopkins this week against that. They're just going to get to run and play defense, I think, in that game for the Chiefs. And we know that's what they prefer to do instead of, putting the ball into Mahomes' hands during the regular season all too much when they don't have to. Now, to finish up our wide receiver talk here, tell me who you'd like the most out of these three guys. If you're, you need a flex play or you're struggling at wide receiver. Jennings against the Buccaneers. We like Deebo, but do you also like Jennings? Calvin Ridley, who's been pretty good over the last couple of weeks against the Chargers, though tough defense, or Ladd McConkey on the other side of that game against the Titans.
Yeah, I definitely want Juwan Jennings of this group. If he's healthy, just double check. And if he's out there running a lot of routes all over the field, now go inside and outside for them, that's going to be a lot of success. So I did say I love Deebo and Kittle, but Jennings can get it on the fun too. I think Brock Purdy is going to have some pretty high volume in this game because it seems like wherever Baker Mayfield plays, both quarterbacks go off. And again, the 49ers defense, not as dominant as we think, and that's going to help the Buccaneers score. That's going to help Purdy and Mayfield go back and forth. Now, Calvin Ridley, I do not like at all because, again, this coverage of the Chargers is really good. Overall, they've been schemed up really well by Jesse Minter. I don't like that. And I don't really like Ladd McConkey on the other side because he lines up a lot in the slot. The Titans are actually pretty good on the inside, a little bit better than they are on the outside. So I do not like McConkey too much. I mean, if you need a Chargers receiver, I would say go with Quentin Johnson this week because of his a little bit volume and big playability. But McConkey, I think, could have a little bit of tough unless he gets the volume, and I don't see that in a game where the Chargers should be ahead.
I'm with you on everything you just said, and I would go also with Juwan Jennings in this group as well. I actually have Jennings ranked pretty high here. I have him. I'll try to find it quickly. I have him as my wide receiver 23 this week. So I'm really high in Juwan Jennings. I think he can have a huge game. And you have him at 23 as well. So we are both we
Right
agree on that. So love that. We're going to go to our tight end talk now and George Kittle. So apparently we just love the 49ers this week, right? Because we love Christian McCaffrey, we love Deebo, we love Purdy, we love George Kittle. So George Kittle is going to be at the top of our rankings, of course, but there's a lot of other guys that you have at the top of your rankings that were shocking. Excited to dig into it.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is a great time to get in on the action. We do have the game tonight here with Bengals and Ravens. That's an exciting one because the total is above 50. It should be back and forth. The Bengals should be coming out firing. Michelle likes the Bengals there to make it close. I do too. I think the Ravens are a little bit too much favored in this game. The Bengals are desperate. They need to get back in the playoff race, and this could be a high-scoring affair. They only lost by a field goal in the first matchup. So that's where I would go. That's where you can think about going if you go to FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets with a win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you actually place your live bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with, again, $150 in a bonus of bets with a winning $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Don't ways to hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct players. What's also great about them is if anyone gets hurt during the first half of the game, it does not affect your lineup. Your picks still stay live and you can still win on your projections. So that's awesome that they do. If you want to get started, Vinnie and I will, of course, give you our favorite 6 picks on tomorrow's episode for the weekend. But there's a great game tonight. We love Zay Flowers. We love Lamar Jackson. We love Jamar Chase. We love Chase Brown. Like, there's so many great projections that you can find on that on the Prize Pick app that you can make some money tonight. To get started, all you have to do is download the Prize Picks app, use code LOCKEDONNFL, and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Prize Picks, run your game. As I mentioned, it's no surprise. George Kittle, right at the top of the list, and then Travis Kelce. But what shocked me here was that you had TJ Hockenson as your tight end 4 and Mark Andrews as your tight end 3 this week. Both spicy takes here from you.
Yeah, I just think Mark Andrews has a good matchup this week. I know it was a little bit disappointing with what we saw with the Raiders and using their tight end last week, but you look at Mark Andrews. I mean, Isaiah Likely is out, so that helps, right? He's not in the lineup. So we'll see a bit of Charlie Kolar probably behind, but that's a big factor gone, right? That means after Zay Flowers, the guy that's going to be open a lot is Mark Andrews. He does well in division games as well. And Lamar Jackson is going to look to him a little bit more this week. So that's why I have him up. The likely injury definitely changes things a little bit because now you have one really good field stretching and red zone tight end to focus on. If you're the Ravens, we figure there's going to be a lot of points in this game as well. If there's points, there's a good chance Lamar Jackson is going to find Mark Andrews in the end zone. So that's why I have him ranked that high. And then TJ Hockenson, I know it's a bit of a leap of faith here, but I look at this team. They need to get another weapon involved. This is a week to do it because you have the Jaguars. The Jaguars, we've talked about how they're bad against quarterbacks. They're bad against receivers. They're also not very good against tight ends. So you can exploit them in the middle of the field. You can just throw on them everywhere. And the Vikings, again, I liked how they picked up Cam Robinson. That keeps Sam Darnold nice and protected, right? Even though he doesn't have Christian Darrisaw. So he's going to be able to pick apart, I think, this team. So it's really a matter of like who has a bigger game. Do they involve Jordan Addison a little bit more than Hockenson? But I still think this is a passing first team against a really bad pass defense. So I think there's going to be balls to go around for all three. I like Addison as well as a sleeper this week on top of Hockenson being kind of the full hawk that we're going to see, if you want to say that.
I hope we can get that. Now, Mark Andrews, I did end up moving up to my tight end 5 this week with the Isaiah Likely news. Like, that definitely will help. He is still, for whatever reason, like last week, he only played 49% of the snaps. Like, he's still not getting on the field enough. But with Isaiah Likely out, then hopefully Andrews can see more playing time, more targets. And we know that he's going to be a red zone, like the top end zone target for Lamar Jackson. So I do like him this week. Hockenson, I have down at tight end 10. It's just I'm worried that they're not going to need him at all, right? Like if they're killing up on the Jaguars, why put Hockenson out there more than you need to? He played 45% of the snaps in the first week back in week 9. And if this is going to be a tight matchup, a tough one that's going back and forth, I'd say, okay, that should increase the second week, but just don't know if it will in this matchup. So that's my worry there with him. I still think he's an okay play though. Now, my tight end 3 of the week is your boy, Cade Otton. He gets the 49ers, which definitely looks like a hard matchup on paper. I'm really not worried about it, though. They have been giving up more yards to tight ends over their last 3 games than normal. They've allowed a 50-yard, a lot of tight end to put up 50 yards in each of the last 3 games. And Cade Otton has 3 straight games with 10 targets. He has 3 straight games with 8 receptions, 3 straight games with over 75 receiving yards. And the last 2 weeks, he's been the tight end 1 and the tight end 3. Like he's just been killing it.
Yeah, I'm at 6. So, I mean, the bottom line is Cade Otton, with the state of the Buccaneers passing game, he is an every week play. There's no question about it. Like, you can debate if you can sneak in Trey Palmer or Jalen McMillan or anyone else until Mike Evans can return, but there's no point in doing that. They spread the ball. Sterling Shepard is also one of those spread out guys, right? But the one guy that is the constant for Liam Cohen and Baker Mayfield is Cade Otton. So every week he's out there. You're playing him the rest of the way. I don't care what the matchup is. Look, we can talk about 3 versus 6 and all that, but it's just strange that this guy was a sleeper and he was coming on as a streamer, and all of a sudden he's an every week play. But a good pivot definitely by the Buccaneers. And you're right. The 49ers can give up a little bit more to the tight end than you think.
Yeah, and I have a fun little note about Cade Otton. He can join Travis Kelce as the only tight ends in NFL history to have 4 straight games with 8 or more receptions.
That's crazy.
That would be pretty crazy if he does that. I'm really rooting for it. Now, with Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram, both of them had a bad week 8. Which one will bounce back? I was going to ask this before we heard about the Trevor Lawrence news. It seems much more likely now that Kyle Pitts will be the one that bounces back instead of Evan Ingram. But can you trust either of these guys or both of these guys this week?
I don't think you can use the word trust in any given week with either of these tight ends. Like, you're just hoping Kyle Pitts make a big play, get in the end zone, do something, right? And some of these games, like they can accommodate Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts. Sometimes they can accommodate London and Kyle Pitts. Like, Kirk Cousins is definitely not putting him up there as a second target. I mean, that's the thing that we expected going into the season, but he's definitely the third guy. So we'll see about London's status here. But again, the Saints are vulnerable all over the field. So I think you'll have some big plays here. So I do feel a little bit better about Pitts. I mean, Ingram, if they pivot, to Mac Jones, he's a guy that's thrown to a tight end quite a bit. So you might see a lot of the shorter passes. You might see the old Evan Ingram volume without score. So I think I'll put it this way. Like, I think Kyle Pitts is more boom or bust. Evan Ingram is a less appealing floor play. But if you just need to plug and play someone, I would say if you had both these guys, if you had to make that decision, just think about the rest of your roster, right? And Pitts, also keep in mind, has a bit of a hamstring injury. So I don't know if that'll be hampering him or hurting his status at all for this week.
And again, if he is dealing with a slight injury, the Falcons will probably beat up on the Saints pretty good too. So maybe he gets to sit out towards the end of the game. One guy we're not worried about at all because it looks like T. Higgins is not going to play tonight. He's very doubtful. It's Mike Gesicki. I'm going to even move him up. We both have him at tight end 9, but now that we officially know T. Higgins, well, not officially, but pretty much know that T. Higgins is going to be out, I'm going to move him up even further. Without T. Higgins, he's just amazing. And last week he went off 5 receptions, 100 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and he only played 36% of the Bengals snaps because they're beating up on the Raiders, but now he should play more with Eric All not even available on IR. He should have a huge night tonight against the Ravens.
Yeah, and the one thing that's happened, Joe Burrow used to struggle when T. Higgins was out. I think he realized, look, T. Higgins is not going to be reliable. He's just going to keep nursing this quad injury every week. We say he's day-to-day, then all of a sudden, wait, he didn't practice all week, he's not playing. And then Jermaine Burton has been thrown under the bus as a rookie that is not showing up. So I think Joe Burrow is just looking for his guys, right? And I think Gesicki has been one of his guys throughout the offseason, like Jamar Chase. So he's just finding guys that he wants to trust more, and that's good. And that's why Gesicki's making all these plays. Like, he's tired of unreliable guys. He needs more guys in there. And again, when he's on a heater like this, throwing 5 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, he's probably going to end up leading the league in touchdowns the way the Bengals defense is. I think you just have to go with Gesicki. And really, any notable weapon that's seen key targets from Joe Burrow has to be your lineup.
Absolutely agree with you there. And then to finish off this tight end segment here, rank these 3 tight ends. And sadly, Sam Laporta is a part of this group with against the Texans, a super, super hard matchup, and he's just not doing anything. Hunter Henry against the Bears. He's been very solid with Drake May at quarterback. Or Taysom Hill. He's back healthy. And they don't have anyone else on offense. So Taysom Hill against the Falcons, Sam Laporta against the Texans, Hunter Henry against the Bears. Rank those 3 guys.
I like Taysom Hill the most. This might surprise everyone, but I'm going to play him. We have a league here that we play in where you can play multiple tight ends. Cade Otton's my other one. But I look at Taysom Hill. I'm playing him, and I'm feeling good about it. Here's another reason, sneaky reason why. The interim coach is Darren Rizzi. He's a special teams guy for the Saints. Where does Taysom Hill plug and play and just be awesome all the time? It's special teams. I think we forget about that, right? So I think you might see the wrinkle of Taysom Hill seeing a few more quarterback snaps. He's definitely going to be the running back here with Alvin Kamara. They have nothing to lose at this point. They have no receivers. They've got no number 2 back. Their quarterback stinks. Like, just put out Taysom Hill. So I think it's sneaky that Rizzi is the guy because, again, he's going to love Taysom Hill and put him out there even more than we probably get from Dennis Allen. So I do like him quite a bit to run, and he scored 2 touchdowns, by the way, in the first matchup against the Falcons. I'm not feeling Sam Laporta because the Texans are actually the toughest team now on the tight end, and why would they go there if the Lions have other good matchups? And Hunter Henry, I actually do like this week. I'm at 13. The Bears allowed a rushing touchdown to Trey McBride last week, but I think Hunter Henry gets in the end zone in Chicago this week as one of the touchdown scorers for New England.
What's nice is he doesn't even have to get into the end zone, and that's why
Yeah.
I like Hunter Henry a bit more than I like Taysom Hill this week. But if I had to go out of these guys, it's Henry because you don't need that touchdown for him to come through. The last 2 full games he's played with Drake May, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 92 yards, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 56 yards. Like, it's not the biggest of games for sure, but then if he comes down with a touchdown, it's a huge game, right? You have the safe points, you have the safe targets, and then if you get the touchdown, it's a huge day. Where if you don't get the touchdown with Taysom Hill or Sam Laporta, it's just going to be a miserable day. So that's why I lean Hunter Henry, and then I'm going Taysom Hill and then Sam Laporta. Like, I don't want to play Sam Laporta this week at all. Luckily, I was able to grab Gesicki in the league. I have Sam Laporta, so I will be playing him tonight. But if you're able to do that, make sure you do that. Like, Gesicki might be out there, so if you have Sam Laporta, please make that move. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, can you go hit that subscribe button for us on YouTube? Also, give us the like on whatever podcast app you're listening to and a review. We'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Enjoy your night. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.